Are our MPs working too hard? The Modernisation Committee, which is chaired by the Leader of the House, Lucy Powell, is responsible for driving up standards. The committee has suggested more standard working hours for our hard-working MPs. But how hard do you think they work? 030 30 80 55 55. The former Lib Dem MP and commentator Lembit Opig speaking to us today, as is Shimeon Lee, researcher from the Taxpayers Alliance. I began by asking Shimeon what he thinks about this idea.
Well, I think that taxpayers will be very deeply disturbed by this development. I mean, MPs cost taxpayers a considerable sum, and taxpayers rightly expect that they actually show up for work. Just some figures. MP pay is £91,000, and if you multiply that by the more than 600 MPs, that's nearly £60 million in total. And of course, MPs have just received a nearly £5,000 pay increase because their pay is, of course, linked to public sector pay, which received an above-inflation pay rise this year. And I think that if you just received a £5,000 pay increase, you come into work the next day and say you want to start working at 4 and start working at 10 and leave at 4, that really is a bit much.
Lembit?
It's not about working harder, it's about working smarter. And one of the problems I think we have now is a political class that doesn't really attract the best talent. And part of the reason for that is because the hours are absolutely abysmal. There's no doubt that I lost relationships because I was spending all my time working. I wouldn't be inclined to go back into Parliament, partly because it was just such a grind. I think we could probably get better politicians.
What's the grind about it?
Exactly the outcomes that we're talking about.
So what's the grind?
Well, it is a grind. You start. Oftentimes, I was driving down to Parliament at 3 or 4 in the morning from Wales. I'd often be in Parliament, especially during the Northern Ireland peace process, till 1 or 2 in the morning. Now, I'm not sure you're going to get the best results from people if they're continuously exhausted and doing like 18 hours a day. Now, I have to tell you, not all the politicians do that. There are some lazy ones, but most of them are working quite hard. And I think it's off-putting. If you've got a family life, if you're trying to do something with your children, you might simply say, I'm out of this. And I know that a lot of people left Parliament because they actually couldn't face the grind. Back to this point, let's get better results, and you could get better results by having a more civilised hours regime, because you'll get better people going in.
Don't you think, Lembit, those people who are standing on their feet all day, hospital porters and nurses, those people that are out digging roads, those lorry drivers that are driving, peeing in bottles because they can't get to a toilet and they're working round the clock and all of that, and they're maybe earning 30 grand a year, 40 grand a year, that they'll be physically sick at the thought of an MP telling them that they're working too hard.
Well, you can have that. I mean, we've had this conversation on your show many times, and you can make the comparison with some incredibly difficult and more difficult and less rewarding and worse paid jobs. But that's not really what we're discussing here. As far as I'm concerned, and I haven't got a vested interest in this because I'm not an MP, but as far as I'm concerned, there is something terribly wrong in Parliament now. The standard has dropped so much. The decisions are being made so much worse at the moment. And I think that's partly, in my opinion, because the job is so unattractive. The people who get into Parliament, the good ones, can actually earn a whole lot more money for fewer hours elsewhere. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're so badly served by politics. Now, that may seem counterintuitive, shorter hours for a better result, but I actually think that's where we are.
Shimeon?
Well, I think if you look at the numbers, MPs are already doing less work. I mean, just compare them to previous years. So in 2023-24, the House sat on just 101 days. That's less than half the number of days they sat in the previous financial year, and actually the lowest number of days they sat in the last 4 years. Now, if MPs think there's not enough, work to fill the time, maybe the problem is that there are too many MPs, there are too many roles to fill. I mean, we have 50% more MPs than the US Congress has congressmen. We have double the number of MPs than the Canadian Parliament. You have 4 times the number of MPs than the Australian Parliament. So maybe the problem is there's simply too many MPs.
No, well, that doesn't even make any sense because on the one side you're saying that we need to have more hours from MPs. Now you're saying we should have fewer MPs. That's completely contradictory. But you're also ignoring the fact that most of the most important work is actually done in constituencies. Now, I don't think the suggestion is that MPs stop doing their constituency work. All that stuff about being online means that you could be in your constituency and still have meetings. Most other companies do that. I do most of my work online now for meetings, and that saves a huge amount of time and wasted effort in terms of travel. So if the MP responsibly does the work, which is really local, fixing the potholes and sorting out the local problems, then this could be a force multiplier for the thing that people really do notice, which is having their MP on the ground in their area instead of sitting on the motorway going to and from Parliament.
Shimeon, what don't you like about us trying to make MPs more comfortable so that we can attract the very best people into those lawmaking jobs?
Well, it's not about making MPs more comfortable or less comfortable. It's about making sure that MPs are paid according to the work they do. We absolutely understand that.
It's also about making the job attractive, isn't it? So that we get the very best we can.
Well, I mean, I think that the fact that you have so many people who actually want to be MPs shows that it's an extremely attractive job. And in fact, there are many accommodations for MPs. So, for example, on the point of having to work in a constituency, MPs actually get an allowance to have a second home in London because of the difficulties of doing the job. MPs also get different hours than people, so they start a bit later and they end a bit later as well. So there are many accommodations to make the job attractive for MPs. And I'll just say again that the fact that you have so many people who actually want to be an MP shows that it is an extremely attractive job.
It's not. I have to say, I think this, as I said before, the standard of our politics has never been so bad, and I think that's because we're not attracting the best people into Parliament. You say the money is high, and it is. 91 grand should be pretty attractive. But the job, and I've done it, I did it for 13 years, the job is intensely corrosive to your family life, to your state of mind. I was just continuously exhausted whenever I was an MP, and probably it meant I didn't do my best sometimes. My feeling is very simple on this. You're mixing up the idea of being in Westminster as being the most important part of the job. And if my interpretation is correct here, they're saying the formal part should be more time limited. I have to tell you, I would agree with the Taxpayers Alliance if the idea is that MP just works at 10 till 4, including the casework. That would be completely unacceptable. But if it means you don't get pinned down in Westminster when you've got people crying out for help in their constituencies, as is happening a lot all over the country at the moment, then I would say this actually means you've got more time to do the important stuff and a little bit of a rein-in on the stuff that often doesn't make much difference. The late Frank Dobson once said to me, 20% of everything we do in politics is virtually pointless, but the other 80% is pointless. And I think it was a little bit like that in Parliament, but not so much in the constituency.
Final word to you, Shimeon.
Well, on the point that MPs have a very hard job and it actually takes a toll on their social relationships, I think that's true of many jobs, not just being an MP in the private sector. I mean, if you look at top executives in major companies, they're working many hours a week. That takes a toll on their family life as well. But unfortunately, that's just the fact of the matter. It's a difficult job. It's a difficult job being an executive in a top company. It's a difficult job deciding on the laws of the nation. And MPs know this when they go into the job. It's a sacrifice, but that's what the job is all about.
Okay. Shimeon and Lembit, thank you very much. Thanks for talking to us.